right. Hello, guys, and welcome to the very first episode of the Master Your Mental podcast. I am super excited about this today because I have such an awesome guest for you guys. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before I let her get into her story. But her name is Emily, and she is the host of the Layman's Terms podcast. Super cool podcast, super cool name. She's also a mental health advocate and sobriety coach and a medical cannabis educator. And she's also doing pretty similar work to me on trying to annihilate that stigma associated with mental health, mental illness, all these things. So I am super excited that she is here with us today. So welcome, Emily, to the podcast.
Hi, Paris. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be one of your first episodes.
Yes, I'm so excited too. Like, you guys don't know how excited I am. Like, we connected on Instagram and I just got done recording for her podcast. So I'm going to be on her podcast as well. So I'll probably link that in the notes for you guys. But I'm excited to get into this episode because we were just chatting just now and she told me a little bit about her story, and she has quite the story, you guys. Very like inspiring, like in terms of the different things that she has faced and dealt with and like had to overcome. So I'm just going to go ahead and like ask you like the first question here. So kind of just tell us a little bit more about you. Like, what's your background? Like, what do you love to do? Like, tell us a little bit more about you, girl.
Yes, I would love to. I am 28. I am currently living in Los Angeles, but I am from the Midwest at heart. I'm an Ohio girl. I love to travel. I love to ski. I love my dog, Remington. He's my pandemic baby. I just literally a year ago, yesterday was my 1 year anniversary with him.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, yeah, I love to eat pasta, foods, all the good stuff.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm happy that you love pasta because I'm like really into pasta. But that is not the focus of the episode today, guys. We're not getting into pasta, but I want to get into something here. So tell us a little bit about for you, like, because I know she shared a little bit of her story here, like quick little rundown, but talk to me about like something happened to you when you were 14 in the eighth grade. So kind of like, let's get into that story because this is just like so interesting.
Yeah, okay. So when I was 14, I dealt with a lot of bullying, like with girls at my school. So I was going through just like a really hard time. I was also like super insecure. I was dealing with depression. I was also dealing with anxiety, which I didn't know at the time was anxiety. Like I didn't know that existed. I just knew I was feeling not right. So basically, long story short, a few of my guy friends, like one of them had gotten like a tooth surgery or something, and like we're in art class and they're talking like, oh, like over the weekend, like we have this Vicodin, like if anyone wants to do some, like blah blah, we're like gonna do it at the football game or like Friday night football games at your school.
Yeah.
Whatever. Friday night comes and I'm like at this football game and I was with some of my girlfriends, but I think they all like left for a sleepover or something. So I was kind of by myself or something. And like, here comes like one of the guys walking down. He's like, hey, Emily, do you want to come with us? And I'm like, oh, sure, whatever. Like, why not? Go up to like the upper soccer field and they have like these Vicodins and they're like, like kind of like crushing them down. And I'm like, they're like, oh, do you want to like snort one? And I'm like, I don't even like know how to do this, but I'm like, sure, like whatever. And it was like just like the most minuscule like amount. It did like absolutely nothing to me, like forgot about it. I went along like with my evening, weekend, whatever. Monday comes, I'm sitting in health class, ironically. And like over the loudspeaker, it's like, can Emily Lehmann and so and so and so and so like come to the office? And I'm like, oh shit.
Oh my
So
gosh.
basically, like someone had called like our school hotline and like tattletaled on us or like whatever.
Oh my gosh.
And so basically we all got in trouble. I was expelled from the eighth grade. Well, it was considered expulsion because it was a suspension longer than 4 weeks.
Oh wow.
Um, I grew up in a pretty small community. So like this was in the Cincinnati Enquirer. It was on the news. My parents still have newspaper clippings from like everything. It was like kind of a big deal.
Wow. Wow.
Um, So that happened. And that was kind of like my first like run-in with drugs. I'd never experimented with drugs before. Growing up, my dad's sister was a drug addict. Her drug of choice was heroin. So I grew up being, pretty familiar with drugs, what can happen, the dangers. My dad always made it like very apparent and told us like be careful and like all the parently things that you're supposed to do for your kids. And I remember he has this chair in his office. It's like this big zebra chair, and it's like always the chair I would sit in when I would get in trouble. And I remember like having to go sit in that chair after this school thing, and like my parents were just looking at me, and I remembered they were just like, the look on their face was just like so, I don't even know, like just like disappointed and kind of like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what
Yeah.
is going on? So I think that stemmed from, I didn't have like the greatest relationship with my mom growing up. I had a nanny that raised my siblings and I and spent a lot of time with us. So she pitted me like against my mom a lot. And so I think that kind of instigated some things. And my nanny would pick me up from school all the time, whereas like other students moms are coming. So I think that just kind of made me have some kind of resentments towards her and things like that. So I was like angry, I was being bullied at school like a lot. I just like really wasn't happy. So I think
Mhm.
all of that kind of led up to this like big situation of like, okay, like something is wrong. So when I got in
Wow.
trouble, I was mandated by the state like to like see therapy and like do these drug tests and like, like whatever. But that was my first time trying therapy. And remember the therapist that I saw, the first one, I would go to her and I hated it. I would like untie my shoelaces, I'd restring them, and I wouldn't even speak to her. I'd just go sit there and be like wasting my parents' money and like not talking.
Yeah.
And then finally I started like opening up and I'm like, okay, like this is like pretty great. And I ended up seeing that therapist throughout like my drug addiction, my all my other situations through like my late teens and 20s. And so now that I live in California, obviously I don't see her anymore and I wish that I could, but she was great. And
Wow. So tell me, because I know like your experience with therapy, like I know you mentioned like when you first went, like that's because like I can relate to that as well. Like we were talking about therapy and like when you first go, like not wanting to talk or like open up and just kind of like using it as basically wasting time, essentially. So, like, what was the most helpful like piece of advice or something that like you guys talked about that really like clicked for you and like kind of put you in a position where you're like, okay, I can open up about this and like I can start having these conversations? Was there like any moment like that, or was it kind of like a gradual buildup to like feeling comfortable with it, or like what was your experience with that?
it was definitely a gradual buildup and just kind of getting more comfortable with her in a sense. And also, I'm, like when we were talking on my show, I'm like a pretty shy, like introverted person. It's really hard for me to open up, and especially with some of the things I was dealing with, like shame and being embarrassed. But I think finally realizing, and because I was 14 at this time, so I'm like very hard-headed. It's like realizing that she was like on my side and that she wanted to help me and that she could be that sounding board. I think I went into it with just like really negative, like I just have to talk to this person, like whatever. But at the end of the day, she was great, and I really value the relationship that I had with her. I feel like an asshole for like how I acted, like in the beginning, but years and years ago, but it was great. And it definitely helped so my parents would come to some of our sessions. And that I think also really helped that situation, between me and my mom to help
Yeah,
mend
because I
some of those.
I remember like talking to you about this before we recording, kind of just like the relationship like growing up. So like with your dad, you told me kind of like you guys were always close, like always have had a like really close relationship. And then you said your nanny, her name was Peggy, raised you from, like basically a baby all the way up to like 15. And then you kind of were mentioning like with your mom, like you guys just weren't that close, like didn't have, the best relationship. And I kind of relate a lot on that sense as well. Cause I know like we were talking on your show kind of like a little bit like how me and my mom also weren't that close. So what really helped you like with it, like when you were going to the appointments at therapy, like open up about like what kinds of things were you I guess like holding back or like like that you felt like you wanted to share, but like you kind of were like, I don't know, like if I'm like gonna like be comfortable sharing this, or like what kind of stuff has like she helped you work through like in the years that you guys were working together? Because you said like she's been like your therapist from like really young age all the way through like college. So that's a really long relationship. So
Yeah, I was honestly like sad like when I moved, because it's like, because it's hard when you get a therapist that one you connect with, two who like knows your whole story, and to have to do that all over again, it's a little taxing. But no, she really helped me work through like my anxiety, my depression. She also helped me work through, and she helped me work through this literally before I moved to California. So like 2 years ago, this is something that I am still working through and processing. When I was kicked out of school or whatever in the 8th grade, I played tennis for my school, and my tennis coach had a son, and I was looking for a tutor to keep me like all caught up in school so I didn't fall behind. Although I was suspended, expelled, or whatever, like I was still having to do assignments, I was still having to turn in the work. Over that time, of course, I get mono, and I got so sick, like
oh my
karma,
gosh.
so sick.
Wow.
Could literally barely walk. My dad is like carrying me to doctor's appointments, sick. So I
Wow.
needed to get a tutor, just to kind of help keep me on track. I did not want to like fail the 8th grade. So I ended up having my tennis coach's son like be my tutor or whatever. And long story short, that relationship was completely inappropriate. He had just gotten out of college. I was like 14, so
And
he
he was 23, right?
must have
Or
been
something.
around 23 or
And
20.
you
Yeah,
were 14.
yeah, however old you are when you like get out of college, you're like in your late, like middle 20s ish, depending.
Mhm.
So yeah, and he it's a was a really weird situation, because deep down I knew like this is wrong, this is not right, but I was like in such a low place. I was so depressed, I had like no friends, and it's like here's this person or like man who's like wanting to help me, and who's there for me, and who's like doing my schoolwork for me, and like doing this and helping me here, and like all of these things. I'm like, that's so inappropriate. And I actually was watching like I don't know if it was like a show on HBO or whatever. It was about like Michael Jackson and the situation with the boys and that whole thing. And I was really watching that, and I really I like paused the show, and I was like, okay, like this happened to me. Like this is like what I felt. I'm like, okay, like, and for a long time, it was like I didn't know how to process it, or I was just like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like, whatever. Like, I'll handle it on my own. Whatever. Like, at a young age, when I was 14, my parents did, ask and inquire about it. I had lied to them. Like, I just got expelled from school. I didn't need like another scandal or like
Mhm.
whatever, like in
Yeah.
my small town. And it's like, my parents are also the adults. It's not like my place really to like, I can't do like, I'm 14 years old. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So him in that situation, he followed me through high school, through college, through, for a while. that situation has always been like lingering in the background. And it took me a long time to really accept that it was wrong and that,
Mhm.
I didn't do anything wrong. He's in the wrong. He should know better. Um, and I feel like I do a lot of comparing, like, oh, it wasn't as like he didn't rape me, or oh, he didn't like abuse, like, so I feel like sometimes people try to compare their traumas to others, and like you
Mhm.
just can't do that. And that's what I've really had to learn. So I've been learning a lot about that lately, and through my therapist at home before I moved, I was like, this is something I really want to discuss and kind of like get to the bottom of. So she really helped me understand that, that situation was not right, was not normal, and that there's nothing that I did that was wrong. And yeah,
Wow.
so therapy
Yeah.
is good.
Therapy is, and I love how you bring up that point, like towards the end of comparing traumas. Like when you're dealing with something or going through something, you kind of, because I that's kind of what I did too. Like when I was younger, like at 15 was raped, right? So, and for me, I would compare it to other people and be like, okay, well, at least it wasn't like this, or it could have been worse, or and I would make up these scenarios kind of like almost in my head, like you were talking about, to kind of like, I guess, like try to, in like a weird way, cope with it, or like try to like move forward. Because I feel like, especially when things happen like that to us, like at such a young age, and like you were saying, like trying to tell your parents about that, and like knowing, like feeling like they're the adult and I'm just like this kid, and I just got expelled from school, like like it was literally in all the papers for like doing this with drugs, and now like this is happening. So it is a scary situation to kind of feel like so young, and then feel like you're almost trapped by it, and like you can't really I guess like talk about it with anybody, because you feel like like how do you
Oh,
even start?
totally. Yeah, I mean, no, that was like a total secret. Like none of my friends knew about him. Like none of his friends knew about me. And I remember one time he was out somewhere and someone like had kind of gotten wind of it or something. And like they were like, this is so inappropriate, like blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't to me, but I had just heard. So I'm like, okay, like maybe he'll stop, like maybe like whatever. Because like where we're the community I grew up in, it is so small, it is so petty, it is so fucking gossipy, it is just like, and like, so had gotten out about him, like that would have totally like obviously ruined his life, and like my dad would have most likely put him in jail. So it's
Yeah.
like, am I gonna, do I want to be responsible for that at 14? But now as a 28-year-old, I am thinking, okay, well, what if has he done this to anyone else? Is he doing this to anyone else like right now? Or could I have stopped that? It's like just things that you think about, but like are out of your control. And when I was like 17, I remember a few times throughout this relationship with him, I would like be like, this is wrong, like this is inappropriate, but like I would always like crawl like back to that safety, like that security. And I remember I sent his wife like a message
Oh, he
telling
was
her,
married.
oh yes, he got married during all of this debacle.
Oh,
Between all of
wow.
this. So I remember sending his wife at the time a message on Facebook or whatever, being like, because it was just kill. I'm like, I can't, like, this is so much, like, this is wrong, like you have to like whatever. And I'm pretty sure he like, I mean, she never got back to me, never said anything. I'm sure he like deleted it or like found it, but it's just like, so that does weigh on me sometimes, like had I had been honest and told my parents the truth, who knows what could have happened? Is he doing, like, I don't know. So yeah, that's
Wow.
something that does kind of keep me awake. It's like you feel like I kind of had a responsibility to, I don't know,
Yeah, no,
just
I totally get what you mean, because I feel like at the time, like because that's pretty similar to how I felt, like with my thing that I was going through with not like, do I
Mhm.
tell people? And I remember, like a big fear of mine is like, if I tell someone this, like they're going to judge me. And that's exactly what happened, opening up and telling my mom and then being called, oh, you're a slut and like you're a whore and like all these. And I was just like, and it was so bad. Like I was like, it took so much to open up about that. So like, what was your experience like in terms of like opening up about that to your parents? When what was the moment like when you like told them about that, and like how did they respond, or like how did they take it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I told my parents about him probably 4 or 5 years ago now, and I remember I just like called my dad and like I was not living at home with them at the time. I was like, I need to come over and like I want to talk to you. And I talked to my dad about it first, just him and I. And like my mom ended up coming home from work and we had like kind of a family discussion. And I remember my parents just kind of looking at each other and being like, I told you so. Like they knew it. Like they knew it. But they I don't think understood like the extent of it or like how long it was going on for or like like I like for instance like growing up when I was like 14 I did have a cell phone and in the evenings my parents would make me put it in the pantry because I would like stay up on it all night or whatever so they would leave it in the pantry and I would like get it in the morning. Well, my tutor, he would text me like throughout the night. And my parent, like my mom or my dad, like whatever, like opened my phone and like saw like, okay, like why is he texting you? Like blah blah. So they like asked me about it. And I was like, it's nothing serious, like, whatever. So they definitely had like their suspicions. But I mean, if I'm not telling them the truth, I don't know
Yeah.
how much more
Wow.
also they do about it. So I think it was just kind of like for me to like get it off my chest. But I do think, like my parents did have their suspicions, and I think that I've just like kind of confirmed those for them. And my mom was just like, ew, what a fucking creep, or like, whatever. And
Yeah.
it is what it is. And then that was it. And it just kind of got swept under the not swept
Wow.
under the rug, but to say, and
Yeah.
then, life keeps going. So
Yeah,
yeah.
wow. Because I feel like that's something that like I like to talk like would like to get into more with you, kind of like just like the perception of, because you mentioned like your parents like had the suspicion, because that is, to be 14, and like my parents would do that too, like take my phone and like hide, like put it away, and like I couldn't get respond to anything. And like the fact that they saw that and they're like, oh, like what's going on about it, and then you like not wanting, because I feel like you mentioned before, like having that responsibility of being like, if I do say something, like is like, like you saying your dad will put him in jail and like this is going to happen, and like you feeling guilty about that, because I feel like that's something that I felt too, is like this like whole like shame factor of like, if I do say what happened to me, like then like what's going to happen, like first of all, like are people going to like believe you, because I know like that was a big thing for me, like being told like, oh, like that didn't happen, like you're just like, you just think it did. And it's like, and that's really scary too, because I know like obviously like everyone deals with it differently, like in terms of like talking about sexual abuse, like not everyone, like I mean there's certain people who are comfortable and they're like able to do that, but I feel like, like kind of like both of us, like not like taking years to really be in a place where you can even like talk about it, because of having like these feelings of, first of all, like shame, and then also like guilt, and like you mentioned like the fact that he like got married through all of this and like had a wife, and then it's like
Got
you,
married twice.
oh my gosh, oh my gosh, and then so you tried to message her, but then it's like also like not knowing, like did she get the message, like did he just like delete it, like does like, and that's scary too, to know like even if you're trying to like ask for help, or like talk about this in a way, or like do something about it, you still kind of feel like you're trapped almost in a way, like is anything ever going to happen, like is this ever going to end, like is he like like does he think it's wrong, does he know that like this is not right. Like that's
Definitely does not think it's wrong. I think he's always just made it seem like but it's like typical, like the I care so much about you. Oh my God, like you're so great, like, like all these things. And it's
like the
like,
grooming stuff and like,
yeah, like I can't wait until you're 18, blah,
oh
blah,
my
blah, blah.
gosh.
Just like all of these things. And I'm like, and I remember I came home from school one day. My parents were out of town. He was like watching our house for some reason. I don't know. And I went home from school and like I was sitting in like a chair and he was like laying on the couch and he kept like throwing pillows at me and was like, come lay on the couch with me. Like, come lay on the couch with me. And I was like, no, no, I'm going to like just stay like in my chair. And I did. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was just like really hard, like trying to not like knowing that like, okay, like this is fucking wrong. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is not right. And then like having like a random man like in my parents' home, like while they're not here, like it's just like very weird like situations. And then a few years before I even moved to Los Angeles, I was at one of my favorite bars. It's called the Oak. And I was like walking up to a table with all of my friends, and lo and behold, guess who's sitting at the table?
No.
Sticks his hand out and introduces himself, like, oh, hi, I'm so and so, nice to meet you.
To you.
And
Like he's never met
to
you.
me,
Like
like
he's
he's
never
never met, like he's never met me before. And I was with like all my friends and like some of his friends that were in his grade from the school that we all went to. And he's like, hi, it's so nice to meet you, blah, blah. And so I'm like, okay, this is like really weird. So for the next like few days, like everyone was like hanging out. And one of my girlfriends was like, wow, the way he looks at you, he must really like you. I'm like, oh, honey, if you only fucking knew.
Yeah.
It was just like so weird,
Wow.
like so crazy.
That's just so wild to me. Like just because just like in terms of thinking about like the extent that some people will go to like keep that a secret or like basically kind of like in a way like brainwash you into thinking like, oh, this isn't wrong. Like, no, like I care about you and you know that I'm always here for you and like saying these things because I feel like that's something I experienced as well too. Like with the guy when I was 15, getting these messages of like, oh, like, it wasn't bad, like I didn't mean to hurt you, or like, that, like kind of like trying to like, I guess like trick you in a way of like thinking like,
Like
okay,
gaslighting us into
gaslight,
thinking that like your
yes.
actions are okay and they're not.
Yeah. And I feel like that's what makes it like, I just feel like that's kind of what makes it really hard for many other like girls and like young women to like talk about this because I feel like there's so much like stigma too around it and like fear and just like shame and then like guilt and like all of these emotions and feelings. And then it's like some people have really bad experiences like when they do open up, like they get like rejected or like shame or like pushed out or like you're a liar, like this is like what are you talking about. And like I feel like it's like almost like this thing of like there's two sides, like are you on my side or are you like do you believe him. And then it's like really scary because like especially like someone like that, like who knows your family so well and is like literally allowed to just like come into your home and like watch the house. So it's like obviously like like your family knows him. It's not like he's just like a strange guy or whatever. That's scary too because it's like when you finally are like, okay, like I know this is wrong, like it's wrong, but then you're feeling like brainwashed and you want to do something about it. And then it's like when you finally say what's going on, like that, like it's like a fear of like, are people gonna do anything about it? Like, or is anyone gonna
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Like, does it matter? Or is it like, are you just like making a big scene for nothing? Is it just going to be
yeah.
like whatever? And no, and you make like a great point. I remember Peggy, my parents had like gone somewhere. I don't know where they must have been out of town again somewhere. And for some reason, Peggy like was not staying with us. I don't know why. She all normally always did when my parents would leave. And I remember talking to her on the phone because we'd always talk. And she was like, I think it's so weird that your parents are allowing him to like stay the weekend or stay the night at your house. She was like, I don't like that. She's like, make sure you like lock your door, like, like blah, blah. And it's like, okay, like, why isn't my mom, like, why isn't
Yeah.
my mom telling me this? Or like, why did, and I'm sure my parents thought at the time, like, oh, we have like this young kid and he's staying with them. The kids are having fun. So like going to do stuff. Whereas like Peggy is like a 70-year-old, like older woman who's like,
Yeah.
not taking us and like doing like fun things. So it's like, I can see like both sides. But
Wow.
it's just
Yeah.
like, it's just interesting to like think on like both sides, like, okay, what the hell were my parents thinking? Like, and it's like, they didn't do it in like a harmful or like a mean way or like any ill will. They just didn't know any better, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is so just the whole thing, like hearing your whole story. Like I don't know, like it just really makes me think about this like a lot more. And I feel like this kind of leads me into like, like the final question I want to ask you. Like, so in terms of like all of this, like, like overcoming like drug addiction, overcoming like the sexual abuse that's been going on for years and years, like what are you doing like right now on a daily basis to really just like master your mental and like take the best possible care of yourself and your mental health?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with the pandemic, it's been a little challenging. Like, definitely in the beginning, I found myself kind of like falling into a rut where I'm like, okay, I'm not motivated. I'm not wanting to do anything. I just like want to lay here and be a sack. Now I love to journal, hot yoga. I have a dog, so I get outside and I walk like at least 4 or 5 times a day. For me, those things really help me. I also love to read. So finding time, whether it's like a self-help book or an autobiography or like a crazy twisted psycho thriller, I
Yes.
really have to like set boundaries, I guess. Also, I like for the drug addiction situation, I really had to cut out certain people in my life and really set firm boundaries and keep those, which was really hard to learn to do. It took me a while. But setting boundaries and honestly just like making a list like every day of like 3 to 5 things that I know that I need to accomplish or get done, whether it be for like a mental standpoint or like whether it's like putting my laundry away or running to the grocery. I find that doing those things and being able to kind of have an organized routine helps me the most. Because if not, I feel like my brain is just like everywhere and I'm scattered and it's too much.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that so much. Like when you talk about like setting boundaries and like making the list and just like doing these little things, that really add up over time and make a big impact. But that's awesome. Like I'm so glad that we had, today to like have this conversation like on my podcast and then I got to come on your podcast. So tell everybody like where can they find you? Like where can they follow you? Where are all the places?
Yeah, my podcast in layman's terms is streaming on all major platforms. You can find me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else. My Instagram is just layman's underscore terms. I'm sure Paris will put everything in the notes for you guys. I have a website as well. It's called inlaymansterms.com.
Yes.
And then
In
I do
layman's
have,
terms. I love it.
yeah, and then I have I have a Facebook community. It's pretty small, but it's for sober curious and like-minded people who just kind of want to get together and talk or share books or bullshit, do whatever.
I
So
love
yeah.
it. Oh my gosh, you're so cool. I'm definitely putting all the stuff in the show notes, but I just want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank all you guys for checking out the first episode of the second season on Master Your Mental. Emily was amazing, and I'm so excited to put this one out into the world. And on that note, I'm going to end it on this one and wish you guys a good day and say goodbye to Emily. So bye, Emily. Thanks for coming on.
Bye, Paris. Thank you so much.